in order to make it coherent. We are 282 former career employees who proudly served our country at the Department of Justice. From prosecutors, special agents, intelligence analysts, to immigration judges, grant managers, civil rights attorneys, and more, we all carried out our duties faithfully, regardless of who occupied the White House, until we no longer could. Each of us left the department either voluntarily or involuntarily because of actions taken by this administration. Our fidelity to the Constitution and our dedication to our country did not end when our jobs did. Now that we've left the department, we believe it is our duty to sound the alarm about this administration's degradation of the Departments of Justice vital work and its assault on the public servants who do it. It is incumbent on all of us to fight for the Justice Department before it's too late. Just as I've come to the floor to ring the alarm bells about authoritarian control taking over America, here are these employees from the Department of Justice in this letter are saying they are ringing the alarm bells before it's too late. Let's find out what they have to say. The next paragraph goes, Department of Justice's mission, DOJ's mission, is to, quote, to uphold the rule of law, to keep our country safe, and to protect civil rights. It's failing on all three fronts. The Justice Department cannot uphold the rule of law when it carries out the President's retribution campaign and protects his allies, violates court orders, evades due process requirements, directs attorneys to violate their ethical responsibilities, and fire its employees without notice or cause in violation of civil service laws. It also cannot keep our country safe when it ousts FBI employees, prosecutors, national security experts, and ATF officials, shelters offices that prevent community violence, shutters offices that prevent community violence, and dismantles drug trafficking operations, purges the attorneys who enforce laws that protect the environment, and shifts highly trained special agents away from counterintelligence and counterterrorism. Oh, I see, thank you for the note, I see that my colleague from New Jersey is on the floor, and I would welcome a question if he has one.
I appreciate it, and appreciate my colleague pausing for a question. And I just want to first say, as I present my question to him, how grateful I am for his stamina and for his strength, but more even importantly for his insightful truths that he has been telling now for well over 14 hours. And in many ways, we see a tradition in this body of being a deliberative body, but it seems now more and more that deliberation is giving way to what the founders never imagined, which is simply conceding to anything that the President of the United States wants. We were born to check and balance the presidency. We are the Article I branch of government. And as my colleague here rings the alarm bell, it is clear to me that the alarm bell he's ringing is not a partisan alarm bell. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. It's about asserting the Article I branch of the Constitution's strength, its its purpose, its constitutional intent. And that is to provide oversight. That is to provide advice and consent. That is to provide the check and balance that we need. And for hours now, what I have been seeing is my colleague, Jeff Merkley, has time and time again been laying plain facts that would not play no matter what party a person is from. A president who is encroaching again and again and again on the constitutional prerogatives of the Article I branch of government. And the result of this is that people are hurting. And I really want to get my colleagues' response to this. The fact is, right now, you have a president not going through Congress, not working with Congress, but undermining congressional intent by gutting and cutting programs, gutting and cutting agencies, gutting and cutting bipartisan approved resources for our states in ways that threaten and undermine the well-being of Americans. We see him approving a tariff policy, not one that has gone through this body. In fact, I would say not one that people in this body would even agree on, that is hurting American farmers, that is driving them to their knees. They want trade, not aid. And as a result of that tariff policy, it's not only hurting the bedrock people who put food on the table for Americans and people throughout this world, but it's hurting consumers by driving up grocery prices. What my colleague continues to point out is how these violations of our constitutional norms and traditions, the insult and injury done to our Constitution, has a real-life impact on the lives of Americans, making us poorer, making us sicker in our lack of access to health care. That we are seeing a time now that if we do not ring the alarm bells, more and more Americans will be hurt by a president who is acting more like an authoritarian leader than a democratically elected executive in the Article II branch. And this is not a left or right moment. It is a right or wrong moment. This is a moral moment in America. And I love what Martin Luther King said. He said, the problem today is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. And so this is a time that my colleague, through doing this extraordinary step here for more than 14 hours, all through the night, standing up and saying, look, democracy has never been a spectator sport. If you love this country, if you love in a deep devotion the ideals of patriotism more than a party, now is the time for all good people to stand up and call it out. And so I want to know from my colleague, this, with the urgency that we have in this moment, with Americans seeing their energy costs go up, with Americans seeing their grocery costs going up, with Americans now seeing the reality of their health care costs going up thousands and thousands of dollars, with marginalized people, with folks who are struggling to provide for their children, for children with disabilities struggling to get the resources they need, with parents not knowing how they're going to meet the rent and pay for medical expenses, how they're going to be able to pay for the basic needs of their families. This is a time that if you believe in the cherished principles of our nation, from patriotism, devotion to our national ideals, if you believe in the ideals of our nation, love thy neighbor, if you believe that we are one nation under God, this must be the time where more people stand up and speak out, because the only thing necessary for the triumph of tyranny is for a free people to remain silent. And so I ask my colleague right now, because there are people saying, what does it matter that a senator is standing up? I ask my colleague right now to maybe say directly to the American people why you are taking this courageous stand tonight, what you hope they will take away, because it's not about you or me, it's not about the 100 people here. We have seen this president back down before when the American people, in a chorus of conviction, stand up and say, no, no more. As Frederick Douglass says, the limits of tyranny are prescribed by the people who face the oppression. I ask my colleague, what is the message that you are trying to send with this courageous stand, with this incredible endurance, with this strong speech you are giving today?
To my colleague from New Jersey, the message, most important, is that the tyranny has already arrived. It is not down the street. It is not around the corner. It will not be encountered on the path tomorrow. It is here at this very moment. And that tyranny comes in two forms, so important to our country. The first is the attack on freedom. Freedom is secured by due process. So when an authoritarian president runs over due process, he threatens freedom for all of us. When an authoritarian president says, I will dictate through research grant control what universities teach, he's stealing the academic freedom of our independent universities and really gutting the vision that people go to universities to explore ideas and to learn, not to receive propaganda written by a government. If you want that version of the world, that's not freedom. That's found in tyrannical governments. That's found in China, not here at our universities in the United States of America. When he proceeds to say we are going to control law firms by suing them and taking away their security clearances and extorting them to put $1 billion of free law into causes the president wants, that is a form of tyranny against the free enterprise of law firms to have the clients they want and serve the people they want. I read an article sometime in the middle of the night that was about the profound impact on nonprofits that are out of favor with the president, and therefore they're not getting the legal help that they had in the past, and how that affects their largely impoverished clients. So there's damage that ripples through the universe from these attacks on freedom. And now is the moment where we have seen the fundamental separation of powers disappear. No, I thought of these robust branches of government, the executive, the Congress, the judiciary, each valiantly defending their role in order to preserve the checks and balances of this beautiful document we call our We the People Constitution. But what happens if the Congress is controlled by a party that says, our goal is to do what the president tells us? Suddenly that check and balance, the president is gone. What if the court, the Supreme Court, says we want to, regardless of what's written in the Constitution, hand more power to the president? And they say, you know what, we'll make the president above the law, which they did in a law case last year. And suddenly you have the three elements that create tyranny in place of freedom, or authoritarianism in place of a republic. And those are a rubber-stamped Congress, a deferential court, and an aggressive authoritarian personality with a good plan. And he came in with a good plan called Project 2025. And the chief engineer on that Trumpian tyranny train is Russell Vought at OMB. So every essential element of the authoritarian takeover of the United States is here right now. Now, you mentioned a reverberation about how the president's policies are making people sicker and poor. And here is the connection. When you have an authoritarian government, it basically operates to the power of the billionaires. And so we saw it at the inauguration. We saw the billionaires standing behind the president. We saw Elon Musk standing behind the president. We saw Jeff Bezos standing behind the president. We saw Mark Zuckerberg standing behind the president. And when you do that, you're okay pursuing legislation that hurts families while helping billionaires. And that is the theme of what we have seen. Here's a picture of the billionaires lined up behind the president. We call sometimes the bill, his major policy bill, the great or the big ugly betrayal, because he campaigned on helping ordinary people. But then on Inauguration Day, there's no ordinary people behind him. There's no champions for health care, no champions for housing, no champions for education, no champions for good-paying jobs and investment in infrastructure. No, those who have already at the very top of the money pyramid in the United States of America are there. So now you have the main bill, and the main bill, what does it do? Well, it savages health care to pay for tax breaks for billionaires. It savages child nutrition to pay for tax breaks for billionaires. So the authoritarian takeover of our government is also linked to this assault on the families. As you said, groceries are going up. The president's employing tariffs that drive up the cost of groceries. If he was looking to help families, he wouldn't choose to do tariffs that drive up the cost of families. And in fact, the president doesn't even have authority under the law to do tariffs to begin with, which he just took it because that's what authoritarians do until the courts stop him. And the courts, moving slowly, have not acted. And you mentioned health care costs going up. Well, I don't know about what the new costs are in your state of New Jersey. In Oregon, the projection was a 68% increase in costs on the exchange. But nationwide, 114% average, meaning Oregon, well, as much as we're shocked by 68% inflation in health care policies, well, nationally, it's more than doubling. So think of all the people who will be unable to acquire insurance. And that's just a piece of the big, ugly betrayal bill, because then you get into the fact that they gutted Medicaid, the Oregon health plan. 70% of the children in rural Oregon are on the Oregon health plan. Think of the devastation when 235,000 Oregonians are projected to lose health care. And what happens when they get sick and they don't go to the hospital because they don't have insurance? So then they get sicker, and when they do go to the hospital, it's the emergency room. And maybe the modest health problem has become a major health problem. Maybe the diabetes that easily controlled has become a foot amputation or an eye problem, an eyesight problem. Maybe the cancer has grown or spread around the body. So not only is an illness more expensive to treat, but the odds of recovery of worse, and it's being treated in the most expensive part of a hospital, the emergency room. And then because there's no insurance to pay for it, the hospital or clinic gets less revenues, and then they have to shut down programs or shut down completely, and then we have less health care for everyone in the community. And then you mentioned utilities, and I was just fielding a question from our colleague from Minnesota, and she said, what about that $8 billion attack on energy projects in blue states? Energy projects that would produce renewable energy that often, at utility scale, is 2 cents per kilowatt hour. My bill in Oregon is fairly cheap compared to the nation. I think it's 12 to 14 cents per kilowatt hour. I'm guessing yours is a lot higher than that. So if that utility can buy energy at 2 cents per kilowatt hour, your bill's going to go down. But I'm pretty sure your bill's going up because of the policies of this administration. So if this administration was worried about families, they wouldn't have passed the big, ugly betrayal that does so much damage to families in order to fund tax breaks for billionaires, wouldn't be using tariffs in this manner, wouldn't be cutting low-cost utility projects that will lower the cost of energy, and thus here we are, 10 months of making Americans sicker and poorer.
And if my colleague would ask the wrong question, because you're making such a great point, and I really hope America hears this, that these policies, these constitutional principles that we're defending here are not just arcane, idealistic things. They have a direct impact on our nation. My colleague is laying it plain. This is what should be animating everybody, is that when you attack the health care of millions of Americans, it doesn't mean you're curing disease and they're not going to have a demand for health care. The demand is still going to be there. And if they're not getting their health care reimbursed, if they're not getting preventative care, if they're not getting regular checkups, they're going to put more demand on our hospitals, which are going to make our hospitals have longer wait times in the emergency rooms, that are going to have our hospitals have less reimbursed care, and our hospitals are going to strain and buckle under that, thus driving up the costs for everyone. You make it plain, and people should hear this. When the president lies to the American people and says he's about all of the above energy costs, he's not. He's about advantaging certain energy over other energy, and it's actually the lower cost energy that he's attacking. Those projects are actually going to lower people's bills. So here he is raising the healthcare costs for everyone, hurting the hospitals that we all rely on, and driving up energy costs for everyone, and giving an advantage to our competitors like the Chinese, who are racing on energy projects in the renewable energy space. But it's even more than that, as my colleague knows. When you have boneheaded attacks on our Constitution, as opposed to going through Congress where there's deliberation and debate, you are actually raising costs in other ways too. As my colleague knows, Americans right now are seeing